The galaxy had seen many wars, but none had begun with such a small mistake as this one. Human explorers had traveled deeper into unknown space, ignoring the warnings of alien maps marked with symbols of silence. They thought those warnings were only myths, ancient stories meant to scare away travelers. They were wrong. At the edge of a dying star system, the human fleet found ruins carved into a planet's rocky crust. The ruins glowed faintly, humming with strange power. The soldiers joked about it, laughing as they set up camp among walls older than memory. They did not know that every stone was a prison chain, every crack a locked doorway. They did not know the prisoner was still inside. The prisoner was not a monster, but a woman, chained in still water beneath the ruins. She had been locked away for centuries by her own people, feared for her strength. Her skin was blue as midnight, her hair pale like moonlight, and her eyes closed as though she slept. Around her, black iron chains bound her arms and chest, pulsing with faint light as if alive. The humans did not believe she was real. To them, she was just another relic of a dead world. Among the soldiers was a man named Darius, known for his reckless nature. Where others feared shadows, he laughed. Where others followed orders, he broke them. He was strong, scarred from past battles, but carried an arrogance that made even his friends uneasy. When he saw the chained girl, he smirked. He leaned close to her still face and whispered to his squad, daring himself to break the silence. Then, in a foolish act, he kissed the prisoner's cold lips as a joke. The water rippled, the chains trembled, and the soldiers froze. At first, nothing happened, and they laughed nervously, thinking it was harmless. But then her lips warmed. Her chest rose with breath, and her eyes slowly opened. They were not the eyes of a helpless captive, but of a queen who had slept too long. The glow from her chains turned bright, casting light across the cavern walls. Her gaze locked onto Darius, sharp and unyielding. In a voice that carried both beauty and terror, she spoke, "Now you share my sentence." The soldiers backed away in fear, weapons raised, but they could not move fast enough. The air grew heavy as if the cavern itself was alive. The water bubbled with unseen heat, steam rising like the breath of some giant beast. Darius tried to pull back, but he felt chains wrap around his arm, linking him to her. The touch burned his skin, yet no fire was visible. He shouted, but his voice was drowned by the sound of the prisoner's chains breaking one by one. The ruins above trembled, stones falling as alarms rang in the human camp outside. What was once thought to be ruins now revealed itself as a tomb, a machine built to hold a single being in silence. The human soldiers rushed toward the exit, but the cavern closed itself, walls shifting like the teeth of a trap. There would be no easy escape. Darius stood trapped with the prisoner, her chains snapping and falling into the water. She rose slowly, her beauty terrifying, her presence filling the cavern like a storm. Her lips moved again, and her words sealed their fate. "You woke me, human. Now the galaxy will remember my name." The cavern shook as if the planet itself had awakened. Dust fell from the jagged ceiling, and the sound of cracking stone echoed like thunder. The human soldiers scrambled for footing, some slipping into the water while others raised rifles that shook in their hands. None of them had ever seen chains move on their own. None of them had heard a voice that made their hearts freeze. Darius stood at the center, his arm bound to the prisoner, unable to step away. Her eyes glowed like twin stars burning in a storm. The blue of her skin shimmered as if alive, reflecting the light of the chains that melted off her body. She did not scream in anger nor cry out in joy. She only stared at Darius with a look that cut deeper than any blade. For centuries she had been sealed away, and now the first face she saw was that of a reckless human soldier. The moment felt like fate. Written in fire, the soldiers opened fire. Bullets sparked against invisible walls that formed around her, bending the air into ripples. The noise of gunfire filled the cavern, but the woman did not move. She raised her hand slowly, and with a motion as soft as a whisper, the rifles were torn from their hands. Metal screeched as weapons bent and fell into the water. The humans, panicked, retreating toward the collapsing walls, their courage shattered. Only Darius remained locked in place, dragged closer by the chain that linked him to her. He shouted, demanding to be freed, his voice sharp but broken by fear. Yet when she finally spoke again, her words were calm, almost tender, though heavy with doom. "You kissed me as a joke, human," she said. "Now the chains that bound me have chosen you. You cannot leave me. You cannot run. We are one." Her voice was neither cruel nor kind. It was a sentence, unshakable and final. The soldiers outside tried to break through the stone that sealed the entrance, their voices echoing faintly through cracks. But inside the cavern, the world felt distant. The prisoner rose higher, standing above the water, her silver hair floating like threads of light. She lifted her other arm, and the last of the glowing chains shattered into sparks. She was free. Yet she did not step away from Darius. Instead, she drew him closer, her expression unreadable, caught between sorrow and vengeance. Darius fought, pulling against the chain, but every movement only tightened the bond. He could feel something burning inside his chest, a heat spreading like fire in his veins. He fell to one knee, gasping as the bond marked him. His vision blurred, and in flashes he saw memories not his own. He saw battles fought and forgotten, skies, thrones of stone stained with blood, and a council of alien kings shouting her name before casting her into eternal chains. Her life poured into his mind, carving itself into his soul. When the visions ended, he gasped for breath, his body trembling. She knelt beside him, placing a hand against his face. Her touch was cold, yet filled with strength that steadied his. Shaking, "Now you see," she whispered. "Now you understand why they feared me. They bound me in silence so the galaxy could forget, but you have awakened what they buried." She leaned closer, her lips inches from his ear. "And you are bound to me until the end of time." The cavern walls split open, and a flood of light poured in. The soldiers outside stared in shock as the chained prisoner, now free, walked out with Darius bound to her side. No one fired this time. No one dared. She moved with the grace of a queen, every step breaking the ground with power. Darius stumbled beside her, fighting to resist but dragged forward by the invisible bond. His fate was no longer his own. He had awakened a prisoner, but what walked beside him now was something far greater. The galaxy would remember her name, and through her bond, it would remember his too. The soldiers outside did not know whether to run or kneel. Their training told them to fight, but their instincts screamed otherwise. The woman's presence was overwhelming, like standing before a storm that had no beginning and no end. Her steps were slow but unchallenged, and the human soldier chained to her side looked more like a prisoner than a rescuer. Darius tried to keep his head high, but his legs dragged through the dirt, every step bound by the chain that connected him to her. The alien prisoner, now free, looked at the sky for the first time in centuries. Her silver hair glowed in the sunlight, her skin radiating a blue sheen that made her seem carved from the heavens themselves. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized the stars above, constellations that had shifted since her imprisonment. "So much has changed," she murmured, her voice carrying across the camp. "And yet nothing has changed at all." She tightened her grip on Darius's arm as though he was proof of this new world's foolishness. The commander of the human soldiers shouted orders, demanding her capture. Fear had not yet broken his discipline. Heavy weapons were brought forward, cannons rolled into place, and drones took to the sky. The soldiers formed a circle, aiming every barrel at the woman and the man bound to her. But when the cannons charged, the ground shook violently, and the machines failed. Sparks burst from their circuits, and the drones fell like stones. She had not raised her hand nor spoken a word, yet her power made their weapons crumble like toys. Darius looked at her in disbelief, his breath heavy. "What are you?" he asked, his voice breaking. She turned her head toward him, her eyes deep as oceans. "I am judgment," she said calmly. "I am what they buried because they feared their own reflection." Her words confused him, but the weight of them pressed against his chest. He was chained to something far greater than he could imagine. And though she walked with beauty, there was a shadow in her gaze that promised ruin. The soldiers began to retreat. Discipline collapsed as fear spread through their ranks. Some dropped their weapons and ran toward the shuttles, others fell to their knees, begging for mercy they did not understand. The commander stood his ground, but even he trembled, his voice shaking as he ordered Darius to break free and return to his men. Darius laughed bitterly, tugging at the chain. "Do you think I chose this?" he shouted. "Do you think I can walk away?" The chain burned against his skin, as if punishing his attempt to resist. The woman stopped, turning to face the humans fully. Her voice rose, not in anger but in power, carrying like a song that carved itself into the ears of all who listened. "You opened my tomb, you awakened me, and now you will all share the cost." She lifted her hand toward the sky, and the clouds above began to swirl. Winds howled, lightning cracked, and a storm formed with unnatural speed. The soldiers screamed, running for cover, but the storm followed them, twisting the very air around their ships. Darius fell to his knees, his strength fading under the weight of her presence. He tried to resist, tried to fight against the chain, but it was useless. She leaned down, her face close to his, her voice soft yet unshakable. "You kissed me as a joke, human. But now every breath you take belongs to me. You cannot escape what you started." Her words were not loud, but they were louder than the storm itself in his ears. He lowered his head, knowing there was no way back. Above them, the storm broke with a deafening roar. The sky lit up with fire, lightning splitting the heavens in half. The humans who had fled to the shuttles watched in horror as their ships refused to launch, systems dead under her influence. Those who hid in trenches felt the earth itself shift beneath them. No place was safe. Darius realized then that she was not simply free. She was announcing her return to the galaxy. And through the bond of chains, his name was carved into that return. The galaxy would not see her alone. It would see them both, prisoner and soldier, bound by a kiss that should never have happened. The storm faded slowly, leaving behind silence heavier than any sound. The soldiers who survived crawled out from hiding, their eyes wide with terror. None dared raise a weapon again. They had seen the futility of fighting her. Their commander stood pale, his pride broken, unable to command what no longer listened. The woman stood still at the center of the chaos, her chains gone, her power unhidden, her beauty undeniable yet terrifying. Beside her, Darius knelt, exhausted and unwilling to meet her eyes. The sky cleared to reveal stars that glimmered like sharp knives. The prisoner, now free, tilted her head back to stare at them. She whispered names that no human knew, ancient words that carried the weight of forgotten histories. Darius heard them and felt the images burn through his mind. Cities of glass shattered by fire, armies kneeling in fear, and her throne of stone surrounded by chains. He gasped for breath, his chest burning as her memories pressed into him. It was more than a bond. It was a prison within his soul. She looked at him then, her glowing eyes softening for the first time. "You suffer because of me," she said quietly. "But you chose to touch me when no one else dared. You became my key." Darius tried to speak, but his throat felt dry, his words broken before they could form. She placed her hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Now you are my keeper, and I am your chain. We cannot be undone." Her tone was final, and the soldiers who listened trembled. Understanding that no plea would change it, the commander finally found his voice, shouting at her to release the human. His words cracked, more desperation than order. She turned her gaze upon him, and for a moment, the commander felt the weight of centuries press against him. His knees buckled, his heart raced, and he fell silent. She did not harm him, but her presence alone stripped him of defiance. "Your world will spread my name," she said. "You will carry it beyond these stars, whether in fear or in worship." Her voice was a sentence carved into the air. Darius struggled to stand, the chain between them glowing faintly with each step. "What happens to me now?" he asked, his tone breaking. She turned toward him, her silver hair glinting like fire in the light. "You walk where I walk," she replied. "You fight where I fight. Until my sentence ends, you will bear it with me." He shook his head, his hands trembling. "I never asked for this." Her lips curved in a faint smile, neither cruel nor kind. "No prisoner ever does," she answered, her words echoing through the ruins. The humans who had fled returned in silence, carrying reports to the fleet orbiting above. They spoke of an ancient power awakened, a being that could not be controlled or destroyed. Admirals on distant ships debated whether to flee or fire from orbit, but fear clouded every decision. No one wanted to be the one to strike first. Every soldier who had stood in that cavern now carried her presence in their minds. She was more than a woman to them. She was a warning that could not be ignored. Darius felt the stares of his comrades, but none dared approach him. He was no longer one of them. He was marked, bound, a man cursed by his own reckless act. He clenched his fists, trying to feel anger, but only confusion filled him. She stood beside him in silence, watching the sky as though waiting for something. He finally asked, "What are you searching for?" She looked at him and replied, "The ones who buried me. They will know I am free, and they will come." Her words struck him colder than the chains had ever been. Night fell across the ruined camp, fires burning in broken machines and shattered ground. The soldiers kept their distance, whispering about legends come alive, about humans cursed for trespass. Darius sat near the prisoner, staring at the chain that bound them. It pulsed faintly, alive with some rhythm that matched his heartbeat. He realized then that his life was no longer his own. His choices had chained him to a story that began long before humanity ever reached the stars. And now he carried her. Sentenced with every breath he took, the galaxy had forgotten her once, but it would not forget again. The night grew darker, and the campfire light cast long shadows over broken weapons and silent men. None of the soldiers slept, their eyes fixed on the chained woman and the human bound to her. Fear had spread among them like a sickness, yet curiosity rooted them in place. They could not look away. Every movement she made seemed deliberate, every breath too heavy to ignore. She was no prisoner to them anymore. She was a storm hidden in human shape, and Darius was chained at its center. Darius sat with his back against a rock, his arms heavy, his heart racing. He stared at the chain that bound him, glowing faintly in rhythm with his pulse. It was alive, a thread of power that sank deeper into his flesh each hour. He clenched his fists, trying to tear it away, but the pain only grew sharper. The woman watched him quietly, her expression unreadable. When he finally looked at her, he saw no malice in her gaze, only inevitability. She had accepted what he still fought to deny. She broke the silence with words that felt like a blade. "You are already becoming part of me," she said. Darius shook his head, his voice hard with defiance. "I am no one's prisoner." She leaned closer, her silver hair falling across his shoulder, her eyes glowing softly in the firelight. "You are wrong," she whispered. "You are mine, and I am yours. The chain does not lie. The bond will not break." Her words left him trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of a truth he could not escape. Above them, the stars shifted as the human fleet repositioned in orbit. Admirals debated whether to unleash bombardment, but none dared strike the ground while she remained with their soldier. She had made it clear that Darius was hers, and they feared destroying one of their own. Messages were sent back to Earth, warning of the discovery, but all carried the same uncertainty. Was she a weapon, a curse, or a queen reborn? No answer came, only silence heavy with dread. At dawn, she rose to her feet, pulling Darius with her. Her gaze turned eastward, toward the horizon where mountains cut the sky into jagged teeth. "We go there," she said. Darius resisted, shaking his head. "No, I am not following you." The chain pulled tight, burning against his wrist, forcing him forward until he stumbled. She looked down at him, her voice calm but final. "You do not follow me. You are carried by me. The sentence binds us both." Her steps crushed the earth with each word. The soldiers hesitated, watching them depart. None tried to stop her. None dared raise a weapon. Fear had broken them. The commander finally gave the order to stand down, his voice hollow. "Let them go," he said. "If she wants him, she can have him." But his eyes betrayed more than surrender. He knew this was not the end. He knew the chain that bound Darius also bound their future. They would not escape her shadow, no matter how far. She walked. Darius stumbled through the rough terrain, dragged along by her stride. His mind swirled with anger, confusion, and a strange sense of awe. She moved like someone who had never forgotten power, each step carrying purpose, even after centuries of chains. "Why me?" he finally asked, his voice low. She looked at him as though the answer was obvious. "Because you touched me," she replied. "Because you woke me. Fate needed a hand, and yours was foolish enough to reach." Her words silenced him more than any blow could. The mountains loomed closer, their peaks wrapped in mist. She stopped for a moment, her eyes fixed on a point beyond human sight. Darius followed her gaze but saw nothing. "They will come," she whispered. "The ones who buried me. They felt the breaking of my chains. They will not allow me to walk free." Darius's chest tightened, his fear sharper than before. He understood now that her awakening was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of another war, and he was chained to the heart of it. The mountains rose like walls of stone, jagged and cold against the rising sun. The prisoner walked with steady grace, her silver hair glowing as the light touched it. Darius stumbled beside her, bound by the chain that cut into his wrist. Every step reminded him that he no longer moved for himself. He was dragged by her will, caught in a fate he had never asked for. His breath grew heavy, but he refused to fall, pride forcing him to stay upright beside her. Behind them, the remnants of the human soldiers watched from a distance. They dared not follow too closely, yet none could turn away. Fear bound them, as much as duty. They had seen their weapons fail, their courage collapse, and their commander broken by her gaze. Yet abandoning Darius felt like betrayal, and abandoning her felt like suicide. So they lingered, caught between loyalty and terror, whispering prayers that no god would hear. The prisoner never looked back at them once. Darius finally found his voice as they reached the foothills. "You speak of those who buried you," he said. "Who are they?" She stopped, her eyes fixed on the mist that curled along the mountains. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of ages. "They were kings," she said. "They were gods to their people. But I was their fear. I was their reflection in the dark. They chained me not because I was evil, but because I was truth." Her words carved into him deeper than steel. The mist thickened as they climbed, turning the world into shifting shadows. Darius's boots slipped on the wet stone, but her steps never faltered. She moved as though the mountain bent to her will. His body ached, yet the chain refused to let him rest. Every time he slowed, the bond burned against his skin, pulling him forward. He clenched his teeth, swallowing his anger. He hated her power, hated his weakness, Yet some part of him could not deny the strange pull of her presence. At nightfall, they stopped in a hollow where the stone walls curved like a broken crown. The air was colder here, sharp with whispers that were not wind. Darius shivered, his hand resting on the chain. "This place," he muttered. "It feels wrong." She looked at him, her expression distant. "It is not wrong," she replied. "It is waiting. The mountains remember what was buried here." He turned to her, his voice sharp. "Buried like you?" Her eyes glowed faintly, and she gave a single nod. As the fire crackled weakly between them, Darius studied her face. She was beautiful, impossibly so, but it was a beauty that held danger like a blade hidden in silk. "Why do you keep me alive?" he asked suddenly. "Why not cast me aside if I am only a chain?" She leaned closer, her gaze fixed on his. "Because the bond chose you," she said. "Because the chains were not broken. They were past. I cannot undo what was written." In fire. Her hand touched his chest, and he felt the burn of her words. Sleep did not come easily. Darius lay awake, haunted by visions that were not his own. He saw her battles, her victories, her chains. He saw stars burning and thrones falling. Each vision pressed harder against his mind until he could no longer tell which memories were his and which were hers. He turned his head to find her still awake, her eyes fixed on the sky. "You do not sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Prisoners do not dream," she said softly. "They only wait." Her voice carried like cold steel. The ground trembled before dawn, a low rumble that grew stronger with each passing second. Darius rose, clutching the chain, his heart racing. The prisoner stood already, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "They come," she said. In the distance, shadows moved across the mist, tall and sharp, not human, not kind. Darius's stomach turned as he realized her words had been true. The ones who buried her had felt her return, and they were here to finish what they started. The mountain would become their battlefield, and he was chained to its center. The shadows that moved across the mist grew taller with every step. Their forms were sharp and angular, their bodies wrapped in armor that looked forged from the mountain itself. They carried weapons of stone and light, spears that hummed with ancient energy. Their voices echoed through the air, chanting in a language older than the stars. Darius felt his knees weaken as he realized these were no ordinary soldiers. They were wardens, guardians of a sentence never meant to be broken. The prisoner stood unmoving, her silver hair whipping in the wind as the wardens approached. Her eyes glowed brighter than before, and for the first time Darius saw a shadow of fear behind them. It was not fear of death, but of recognition. She knew them. She remembered their faces, their armor, their voices. These were the same who had chained her, the same who had locked her beneath stone in silence. She whispered under her breath, not to Darius, not to anyone, but to the chains that had once held her. Darius tightened his grip on the glowing bond, his heart pounding. "What do we do?" he demanded. She turned her gaze to him, her expression unreadable. "We do not run," she said. "We cannot run. The chain ties us together, and their eyes are not on me alone. They are on you now. You are my reflection. Human, and they will not allow you to walk free either." The weight of her words struck him like stone. He had not just awakened her. He had inherited her enemies. The wardens stopped a short distance away, forming a circle around them. Their leader stepped forward, a towering figure with eyes like molten fire. He spoke in a voice that shook the mountain. "You were warned, you were sealed, and still you rise." His gaze shifted to Darius, narrowing with disgust. "And you, human, are foolish enough to bind yourself to her. Do you know what you carry? Do you know the curse that now stains your blood?" His voice cut like a blade through the air. Darius tried to answer, but the prisoner spoke first. Her voice rose with defiance, echoing against the stone. "You call me curse because you feared me. You chained me because I held the truth of what you were. I was never evil. I was only stronger than your crowns, and your crowns could not bear. Her words rang with power, but the wardens did not flinch. They had heard her voice before, and it had not saved her then. They raised their spears in unison, their tips glowing like burning stars. The air thickened, vibrating with energy. Darius felt it pressing into his chest, crushing his lungs. He stumbled forward, gasping, his hand gripping the chain. "Stop!" he cried. "She is not what you say she is." His words sounded small against their voices, but they carried something else, defiance born from fear. The warden leader turned to him, his eyes burning brighter. "You defend her," he said. "Then you share her sentence. You are no longer human. You are bound to her fate." The judgment was spoken like a law. The prisoner moved then, faster than sight. She raised her hand and the ground split, stone walls rising to block the warden's advance. The mountain trembled, rocks falling like rain, the air filled with dust. The wardens did not retreat. They marched forward, breaking the stone with their spears, their chants rising louder. Lightning struck the cliffs, fire spilled across the ground, and the battlefield was carved by forces older than mankind. Darius fell to his knees, the chain pulling him upright again as her power surged. The prisoner's voice filled the storm, sharp and commanding. "If you come to bury me again, you will fail. The galaxy has forgotten me once, but it will not forget twice. And now I carry more than my own chains. I carry his." Her eyes burned as she looked at Darius, and for a moment he felt her strength pour into him. His body shook, his vision blurred, and power like fire crawled through his veins. The bond was no longer only hers. It was theirs. The wardens charged, and the mountain roared with war once more. The wardens surged forward, their spears cutting through stone and fire alike. The prisoner stood unshaken, her silver hair whipping in the storm she had summoned. Darius felt the chain burn hotter against his skin, binding his breath to hers, binding his strength to her will. He cried out in pain but did not fall. Instead, he rose, pulled higher by her power. For the first time, he felt not like a prisoner, but like a weapon drawn from its sheath. The wardens struck together, their chant rising like thunder. Their spears clashed against a shield of light that burst from the prisoner's hand. Sparks scattered, the mountain shook, and the air filled with a roar louder than war. Darius stumbled forward, his arms glowing with the same light that burned from her chains. He looked at his hands in disbelief. Power raced through his veins, alien yet alive, as though he had become a part of her body. The bond was no longer invisible. It was fire made flesh. The leader of the wardens raised his weapon high, his eyes locked on Darius. "You are not meant to carry her burden," he roared. "You are human. You will break." Darius clenched his fists, his voice defiant through the storm. "Then I will break standing." The words came unbidden, but they rang with strength. The prisoner turned her gaze to him, surprise flickering in her eyes. For a moment, it seemed, even she had not expected him to stand beside her. For a moment, the chain between them pulsed with unity. The battle became chaos. Lightning tore the sky apart, stone split under the weight of power, and fire swallowed the cliffs. The wardens fought with the strength of legends, but the prisoner answered with fury long denied. Each strike of her hand shattered their weapons. Each step shook the mountain. Darius followed, dragged yet unyielding, striking when she struck, enduring when she endured. Together they moved like two sides of the same blade. The wardens had come to finish her, but they found themselves facing something greater. The prisoner's voice cut through the storm. "You cannot chain me again. I am no longer alone. His blood carries mine. His life carries my sentence. To bind me now is to bind us both." Her words shook the wardens, but their leader pressed forward, his spear glowing brighter than the sun. He hurled it with the force of the mountain itself. Darius saw it coming, too fast to dodge, too powerful to stop. Yet the chain pulled him forward, and without thought, he raised his arm. The spear struck him full, but it did not kill him. It burned, it seared, but the bond turned the pain into fire. He screamed, but the scream was not weakness. It was power unleashed. The prisoner's eyes widened as light burst from his body, a mirror of her own strength. The wardens staggered, their formation broken, their chant lost in the roar. She stepped forward, her hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Together they raised their voices, not in words but in force, a storm of power that swept through the mountains. The wardens were thrown back, their spears shattered, their armor torn. The leader fell to his knees, his fire dimmed, his voice breaking under the weight of defeat. "You cannot walk free," he gasped. "You will only bring ruin." The prisoner looked down at him, her voice calm but sharp. "Then ruin will remember me." She turned away, pulling Darius with her. The wardens did not rise again. They lay scattered across the stones, their chant silenced, their sentence broken. The storm faded, the mountain stilled, and the silence that followed was not peace but warning. The prisoner stood tall, her chains gone, her bond alive, her name burning once more across the stars. Darius staggered beside her, his chest heaving, his arms still glowing faintly with the mark of the spear. He looked at her, confusion and anger still twisting inside him. "What am I now?" he asked. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable, her voice steady. "You are not my prisoner, you are my sentence, and I am yours." He wanted to deny it, but the chain pulsed against his heart, and he knew it was true. He had kissed her as a joke, but the galaxy would remember it as the moment their fates became one. Together, they walked into the mist, prisoner and soldier, no longer chained by iron but by something far stronger. Their story was no longer hers, or his alone. It was theirs, carved into the bones of the galaxy, unbreakable and eternal.